Hey everybody, Kyle Goeth here from GoatFilmReviews.com and the Goat Film Reviews YouTube channel, and I have my first reaction to the new Francis Ford Coppola film, Megalopolis. This is Coppola's passion project. I think he's been trying to make it for 40 years. It's had numerous stops and starts. In fact, we saw a Q&A before the film screened with Robert De Niro, who was supposedly going to play one of the roles in the film, and he did a table read, like he said 30 years ago for this film. And he's like, I can't even really remember what's changed from that version to this version, but there are differences. And so he's definitely been trying to make this film for a long time, trying to get it off the ground, but it is an expensive film. And especially recently, you can tell that Coppola his movies are not making bank in a way that so he had to finance it himself. We've got a couple of those this year, films like Trap, films like Horizon, An American Saga, that have not worked as well for me personally. And unfortunately, Megalopolis is another one of those kinds of films. This movie is an absolute mess. It's a noble mess. It's an ambitious mess, but it's probably an overreaching mess. And what's crazy about it is how underdeveloped the story feels. I think this is a script that's probably been rewritten to the point of complete disaster at this point, because it's a movie that touches on a lot of major themes, but does so in kind of the blandest ways possible in terms of actual like character work and storytelling work. That being said, the movie is shot with an epic scope to it, probably an overreaching scope, because I don't think that the visuals really aid in the film as much, because some of them are just so cheap looking. There's definitely a lot of characters standing in front of green screens, it feels, in this film, or at least it looks that way. Yeah, for a good chunk of the first half of the film, I was really kind of feeling it. I was like, you know, it's bonkers, but it feels like it might be my kind of bonkers. And I think the film just kind of doesn't do enough with what it has set up. I feel like this is an epic. Adam Driver is the lead in the film, but there's a number of characters that get additional screen time as well, including Shia LaBeouf, Natalie Emmanuel, Aubrey Plaza is a big name in the film. She does quite a bit of heavy lifting. But the weird thing is, I feel like very few of the characters feel real within the world, and it feels like several of the actors are in different movies, and maybe there wasn't that cohesive connection with the director. He said in the Q&A before the film that actors do most of the acting work, and you can't give a lot of credit to the director because, you know, we just give nudges and pushes. And I feel like he could have nudged a little bit more to get these actors to feel like they were cohesively in the same film together. The visual palette on display is interesting, and I would have loved to have seen the film with more practical looking effects and perhaps just more time taken with the CGI to make it look better, because there's a lot of moments that it's very obvious that a character is not with us in the scene. But the film is ambitious. It tries new things, and I want to give it credit for that. I mean, there's one thing that happens, at least in the experience version we saw the film. I don't think this is going to happen in the theatrical run, but there was an actual like portion where like the film kind of came alive and involved someone in the audience, which was kind of bonkers. I don't think that version is going to be played in regular cinemas, nor do I really know if it added that much to the story. But yeah, there's so much going on, and yet there's not enough going on. And I feel like the closure, especially at the end of the film, for characters like Adam Driver's Caesar, I'm blanking on the last name, Caesar, his character, as well as the mayor played by Giancarlo Esposito, their dynamic is very much that they are enemies throughout the entire film. And I feel like the finale we get for those two characters is not really all that interesting. The finale we get for Natalie Emmanuel's character, she's the mayor's daughter, not that interesting. The finale with Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, Jon Voight, more interesting, I guess I would say, but kind of like out of left field, and I don't really know how it matters what happens to them in the film related to the other characters. There's just a lot of things going on, and I think there's a lot of ideas that, while I agree with them, you know, Coppola said in the Q&A beforehand that there's a line in the film, and I agree, this is the best line in the movie, where one of the characters says, we need to have a conversation about the future, and I want every person on the planet should be able to have part in that conversation. And I think that's an interesting line of dialogue, and I think it does set up, I think, what Coppola is trying to do. I just don't think it's very successful. I've sat on this movie for a few minutes, and I'm probably going to need to sleep on this movie, I think, in order to accurately see, because maybe this is kind of the crazy thing about this movie. As much as it's bonkers and weird, of the passion projects that haven't worked this year, like I said, Trap and Horizon, I don't know that... I think this is probably the one I'd go back to and watch just because it is swinging for the fences. I just don't think enough of it's actually hitting. So I would be interested in checking out the film again with some time and distance from it and knowing how the film plays out, rewatching it in that way. I just don't think it's going to change my thoughts on it too much. I feel like, if anything, it might make them go down a little bit more because there's some really wild stuff. There's a line Jon Voight says in this movie about his thing. I'm going to say he says something about a boner in this movie that is so weird and out of place near the end of the film, and it's those kinds of lines where it's like, I feel like Coppola needed to have a writing partner for this film because it was so important to him. I feel like there was a sense of he's making the movie he wants to make, but perhaps he should be involving another writer in that process. Someone who can kind of take his ideas and translate them through. That was one of the best things about his Godfather films, was that he was working with such a great writer in Mario Puzo. And I think that this is a movie that kind of showcases that Coppola's not really connecting with like the people on the ground as much, I don't feel, because seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding of how people talk. I've always felt like The Godfather had a realistic talk to it. I feel like Apocalypse Now had a realistic talk to it. This movie doesn't feel like these are real people having real conversations, even though it's a fantasy fable. So like there's a certain amount of loose, kind of movement away, but you can see what he's kind of going for. And I just don't think it's very successful. And it reminds me a lot of his previous films that I've seen, like Youth Without Youth, like Twixt, where you can definitely see that there's ideas at play, but he's not putting them together in a cohesive package that makes those films uplifted. I think there's probably, it's definitely worth checking out if you are curious about the film, but at the same time, I can't honestly recommend this one to anybody because I don't think most people are going to have a good time with it. I don't think most people are going to be affected by it in the way that Coppola wants us to. So while it's a noble effort, while I'm happy he got to make his passion project, and I hope he's happy with the finished product, it just wasn't very good. I don't think it was terrible. Like, I'm giving it kind of like an okay rating. It's okay, but there's some really weird stuff that doesn't fit in the movie. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough for me. And as the film went on, I realized I wasn't connecting with the material in a way that was satisfying for me. So unfortunately, I have to say I cannot recommend Megalopolis. But let me know if you've seen the film. I think it's going to be playing in IMAX starting on the 27th of September. And I do believe this movie is going to underperform. I do think it is going to be pulled from theaters fairly quickly. So if you do want to see the film, see it opening weekend, because you might be waiting for a bit before Lionsgate has a release of it at home. But let me know your thoughts down below, what you thought about Megalopolis when you got done, and maybe give me some of your comparisons to Coppola's career, especially the later portions. Do you think this is a step up from his previous films or a step in the wrong direction? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. While you're down there, please like and subscribe. There are 2 free things you can do that help to support the channel immensely, and you never miss new episodes of the show as they drop. You can also find goatfilmreviews.com for my many written reviews. You can find Goat Film Reviews on Facebook. You can follow me personally at Almighty Goatman on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Threads. And you can find my show, Kyle and Nick on Film, that I co-host with Nick Palachuk from the St. Paul Filmcast. We have new episodes of that show every single week. And you can also check out the link in this description for the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance, of which I am a member. We have new reviews about Megalopolis from a number of the critics in that group, or you can just read more of my stuff too. That's all right. Whatever you decide. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us.